Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a situation that's been widely reported and widely discussed in the media concerning the M1 MacBooks. Basically, some users back in January reported that while using Smartmontools, they noticed their SSDs were writing enormous amounts of data. And they linked this to the fact that the MacBooks use what's called swap memory and writing to the disk whenever you're out of RAM. Basically, using swap memory, the Mac realizes that you're running out of RAM and it chooses to write stuff to your SSD so that you don't end up with long loading times or apps crashing or that sort of stuff. Well, according to those users, to what they reported, the M1s in particular seem to be writing a hell lot of data on the SSDs. Now, why is this a problem? Well, every SSD has a finite lifespan, okay? So it has a number of times that it can have data written to it before it fails. You're gonna go like, Andrei, you're an idiot. Don't you know you can just swap out the SSD? Yeah, well, catch is, this isn't your every other notebook. Because Apple chose to build the M1 as an SoC, which means system on a chip, this means the SSD itself is soldered onto the chip. So replacing it at home ain't an option. Right now, that's not really a problem. Most of these things are under warranty because, yeah, they're a few months old at this point. But what happens 2 or 3 years down the line when usage increases and maybe the SSDs start to fail? As I said, the users use the tool called Smartmontools, which is basically a utility that helps you discover the lifespan of your SSD based on your current usage. It basically is a software tool that pretty simply estimates the amount of data written to the SSD in question and how much lifespan it still has. How is that lifespan calculated? Well, there are 2 universally accepted methods. One is TBW, which stands for terabytes written, and the second one is TWPD, drive writes per day. Basically, they estimate the lifespan of an SSD before it fails. The TBW, as the name kind of implies, means how many terabytes can you actually write to that SSD before it fails, whereas drive writes per day estimates how many times you could rewrite the entire capacity of the SSD each day until it fails. Why was I concerned? Well, because of my use case. As some of you may know, I purchased the M1 MacBook Pro specifically so I can run the YouTube channel off of it. And this is basically what I've been doing for the past 2.5 months. My use case is as follows. I will film videos with my iPhone like I do now. Then I'm going to copy the data, the 4K files, to my MacBook. Then I'm going to load all of the clips into iMovie. There I will edit them, add effects, and add screenshots and whatever else I deem necessary. Then I will export it at the highest possible setting. The result is, first of all, the input files are pretty large. 4K videos tend to occupy multiple gigabytes, so the input is somewhere around 20 to 30, even higher for each video. The iMovie library itself basically copies the entire clip again so that iMovie can do the editing without altering the original file, and the export file itself is usually much larger because I'm exporting at ProRes, highest settings possible. You're talking about an output file that's in 50, 60 to even 80 gigabytes in size, rather beefy files. This means that for every single video that I upload, I end up pretty much filling up the content of the SSD and then removing it for the next video. So I'm writing a lot of data. Also, during the editing process, my Mac ends up using quite a lot of swap memory because I have the base option with only 8 gigabytes of RAM available. So I was a little bit worried by all of this. And what got me even more worried is when I visited Intel's page. Basically, Intel put together a guide of what you need in order to do 4K video editing. And their conclusion, TLDR version, looks something like 16 to 32 gigs of memory and a dedicated GPU with at least 4 gigabytes of memory itself. I have neither of those on my Mac. So yeah, it ends up using a lot of swap memory. So I got rather concerned about all of this swap memory and SSD life thing because like you guys know from my review, I ended up paying quite a lot of money for it, and I was a bit concerned. Will the SSD fail? I've seen comments to these articles to the effect that maybe I am using the Mac wrong because it's not designed for this kind of workflow, but then why the Pro in the name? I mean, I don't really get it. My level of concern is also a little bit amplified by the fact that I know that Apple, like many other companies, does make mistakes, and they usually gloss over them. And Apple has been extremely quiet on this. Not a peep, nothing, not a tweet, not an email, not anything to anyone. So that got me reasonably concerned. So given the rather intense usage of the MacBook that I'm putting it through, I decided to install Smartmontools on my own and do some observations as to the health of my very own SSD. Just how bad can it be? Luckily for me, there's a fantastic article, I'll link it in the description below, by a gentleman by the name of Roman Loyola. I hope I not misspelled the guy's name. Kudos to him for putting the article together. It's on Macworld, where it's exactly a step-by-step process of how you can do this for yourself. I've done it, and if you have a Mac, you can do the exact steps yourself. The article has been terrifically helpful for me, as I've never actually been troubleshooting a Mac before. Basically, there are a few basic steps. First of all, you need to install Xcode. That's pretty easy and straightforward. It's from the App Store. You just click on download.
1 hour later.
And it takes about an hour. It took me more than an hour actually. I canceled the installation twice because for some reason or another, Xcode takes a very long time to install. There's actually some forum posts on Apple support pages about this. Anyway, if you do it, give it time, 1 hour and a bit, and it will install. After that, the next step is installing Homebrew, and luckily Roman in the article put the exact step-by-step that you need to follow, terminal commands included. So I did all of that. Word of caution here as well, the default path didn't work in my case. I had to use the second edited one that he also provides, but conclusion is it worked fine. Now, before we move on to the next part of this video, I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you find this video informative, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click the bell notification so you get notified when new videos are out. This will greatly help me in growing the channel. Thank you very much. Basically, it says I have 99% spare threshold left. It's pretty good. I mean, it should be, right? So I have 7.11 terabytes of data written, which is pretty high, as you'd expect. But if I split those 7.11 terabytes over the 90 days of usage that I've had, that results in 79 gigabytes per day, which sounds reasonable, at least given my rather extreme use case. I've dug around a little bit online and have found that for a high-end SSD that Apple would use, the TBW would be somewhere around 700 to 1000. So 1000 terabytes of data written, 700 being kind of the baseline. If we multiply the 7.11 by 100 to reach 100%, that's roughly 7100. Smacked where we'd expect it, between 600 and 1000. Probably the 1000 would represent of the value more inclined to be found on the higher storage SSDs. Generally, SSDs perform better in terms of TBW if they're higher in capacity. So the higher you go in capacity from the get-go, the better the lifespan of the SSD will be. That's just some technical stuff that you ought to know. But for my base model, the 256 I have in my Mac, it means I'm going to be using this one for years and years and years before I run into any sort of issue at my current relatively high use rate. Similarly, if we extrapolate the results a little bit and do some basic math, we're going to get to a drive writes per day of 2,700 plus, which is amazing. This is a very high-end SSD. So pretty much Apple knew it when they built the Macs. They knew that it's going to use swap memory, but it would be fine in the end, because if I do the math, at my current usage, the laptop should last me 7 years plus, which is insane. I'll probably switch it until then. Anyway, Macs have a long life. Users are using Macs that are even older than that and generally have no issues. So my degree of worry has come down quite a lot after seeing these results. And you should try this if you have an M1 Mac. You should try to do the same steps on your own Mac. Remember, the Smartmontools, they're an estimate more or less. They estimate using software. They're not 100% accurate, let's say, but they do give a very solid indication of the lifespan of your SSD. Now, there's another YouTuber who's done an entire series on this, Created Labs. I'll link his channel in the description. Basically, he went through all the details, he tried to mitigate the issue, and the TLDR version is use apps that are optimized for the M1s, because those that aren't tend to use a little bit more swap memory. And to no one's surprise, use Safari instead of Chrome. Who would have guessed? Chrome is a resource hog on Windows. It's a resource hog on the M1 Macs. Who would have guessed? Who would have seen that one coming? So, all in all, what do I think about this whole situation? I think it's being a little bit blown out of proportion. Maybe the users who initially reported this have an even more extreme use case than I do. That's totally plausible. Or maybe they have defective units. It's also very possible. Remember that a small percentage of all of the devices that we buy end up being either dead on arrival or having rather serious issues from manufacturing that were simply not caught in the QA process. It happens. But regardless of that, you're most likely, if you have an M1 Mac and you're using it for day-to-day tasks or even for rather more extreme workflows like I do, you're going to be totally fine for years and years to come. With that being said, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.